Okay, Mrs. Urdhwarashe, could you tell us what is the scope of the MOU that ARAI has with BHEL?
ARAI and BHEL, being two organizations under the same ministry, this was seen as an opportunity to work together. ARAI has a strength of developing technology and the domain knowledge with respect to electric mobility. BHEL has a strength in power electronics and manufacturing capability. So that was put together. And from that point of view, charging infrastructure, that is, development of chargers and manufacturing it, is one of those areas. Other areas of cooperation is with respect to BHEL is wanting to develop buses. And ARA has a strength in designing and developing the technology for lightweight buses. So that's where the collaboration is featuring.
Lightweighting, that's again, while it is always a key focus area in the conventional industry, in electric mobility, it becomes even a more sensitive topic, right? So, towards that, could you tell us, throw some more light on what are the technology, lightweighting technology that ARA has developed? Is it composites or anything beyond that as well?
We have developed a aluminum superstructure for buses, which will give about you know 30% weight reduction. That contributes very greatly to electrification success stories for the country. So this technology is now available and being talked about with several manufacturers. The other the areas in which we are working is obviously suspension and other components which add up finally to the vehicle cost, and use of alternate materials is what is being pushed there.
Talking about electric mobility, we have India, the automotive industry is extremely highly competitive, as much as it is promising in terms of the growth scope. In the era of electric mobility, what do you think Indian manufacturers should do to kind of be at par or maybe leading the global players in the EV space? How can they do that?
Yeah, India has an advantage of scale, and we have to cover all the segments from two wheelers all the way up to buses and trucks. In my view, the success will lie in public transportation, where there's a lot of encouragement from the government policy side as well as infrastructure getting ready there. So I think that is something which manufacturers should encash now. Under FAME scheme, already you might have noticed that there's a big announcement of coming up for 5,000 buses now to be covered. So that's a huge number for OEMs to work upon. On the auto rickshaws also. Under the smart cities, that's one area in which electrification is very, very relevant. In my view, on passenger car segment, I think the market will drive. It's not the government policy that will
Drive the adoption of.
suffer. Yeah.
Right.
So
And
that's how it.
on the two and three wheelers also, do you think the Indian OEMs have an inherent advantage, especially in the domestic market?
Yes, but I think the dilemma is currently entire development efforts are going into BS6 development. And while, of course, electric vehicle development is the national priority for the manufacturers, that's where actually the problem lies because the deadline is already approaching for BS6. So, post BS6, I think we can anticipate much more growth in electrification
Right.
than this year.
And during that period, or maybe prior to that as well, are you, because localization of EV technologies is a major hurdle. Towards that, is ARAI developing, say, any solutions, be it in say BMS or even battery technology itself, in addition to what you have done with ISRO and any other such activities like beyond the BHEL agreement on its own as well?
Yes, you mentioned about being a hurdle. I think it's an opportunity. There are different industries which are coming up, and what ARA is wanting to do is position the testing and validation part of our organization much open for such sectors. There are incentives, there are good opportunities for startups there. So what we do is we give all the technologies that are developed inside the area to these startups, which will enable them to scale up their productions. We are not into a space where we go into any production. We work on technology levels up to 7 or up to at the most up to 8 on the scale of 1 to 10.
Right, right.
So that's where we figure in.
Also, talking about electric mobility, the other factor is the potential risk associated with the whole technology. We you must have read about that unfortunate incident of a fire, no, of a explosion in an electric SUV. So, towards that, what are the solutions? What are the steps that should be taken? What are technologies that you are working on?
Multiple ways it has to be handled. One is at the vehicle level on the construction side. Obviously, the crash related regulations are specifically addressing the crash compatibility of EVs. On the component side, even the charging temperatures going higher than what are prescribed for are very, very detrimental for batteries. So that's also to be controlled. From that point of view, a solution such as swappable battery solution is being talked about, that the charging happens at a controlled environment. So that's one area in which some thought is going. Another area is with respect to training the people in maintenance, in running the vehicles, um, even the first responders in case of a fire. If a vehicle catches fire, um, generally the first responders know how to handle the fire, but specific attention with respect to EVs needs to be done. So it's a very different requirement and very different level of power that we will be handling.
The only common factor is that it's an automobile.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's
Yeah. But all said and done, any new fuel always is associated with these kind of uncertainties. We all know that when the first automobile was run on India on the roads, people were afraid, isn't it? When we are talking about hydrogen to go on vehicles, it is always seen as a hazard or a potential hazard. So, along with it comes tightening of safety regulations. Along with it comes also user interfaces, training people to handle these technologies. So, it's a long journey.
is the government looking at drafting any regulation specific to electric vehicles, maybe in the area of safety or something else?
Yeah. The basic regulations are very much in place. Based on that, only the testing and approval takes place at ARA. There are component level tests which are performed on critical components like batteries. Say, example, nail penetration test. It's a very specific test which does assessment of integrity of battery design. There are vehicle installation level tests. For example, during charging of EV, there should not be any short circuiting and things like that. So those types of vehicle level tests, and then of course vehicle construction. Um, and I mentioned about the crash test. There are several other tests which are with respect to handling of electric power on the vehicle, because as you would imagine, the vehicle as such is connected to road by only tires, isn't it?
Yes.
So the tires act as insulators, and therefore vehicle doesn't see any grounding.
Yes.
So that's the fact,
Right.
and one has to be mindful of therefore electric charge being utilized on the vehicle for propulsion purpose.
So these are set regulations that you have
Yes.
drawn up. And talking about electric mobility or say new propulsion technologies, the government is also looking at talking about ethanol, methanol, and perhaps hydrogen as well. How do you see this panning out in terms of what is the government's thought process when it comes to these new propulsion technologies beyond electric mobility?
I think I would not like to comment on government's perspective. I would like to focus my thoughts on how ARAI looks at it. From a technocrat point of view, we are agnostic to any fuel. Therefore, we are examining all the possibilities. So, as you may be knowing, that area has worked on ethanol. There was a research project which was done for assessing E20, that is 20% of blending in petrol, that has been successfully completed. That report is available for the designers, for the city planners, and things like that. Similarly, we are working also on methanol, and up to 15% blending has been successfully tried out on two-wheeler, three-wheeler, as well as passenger car. All these fuel possibilities or blending possibilities also open up opportunity for use of alternate fuel to reduce our dependency on imported fuels.
Right.
That's the thought.
Right.
From that point of view, anything that is required to be tried out on technology side is what we are doing.
And one of the projects, if I'm not wrong, was on hydrogen, right? Hydrogen adoption, which where you were, I think, planning to start a pilot project. Could you share what's the status of that and what kind of blend are you looking at?
Again, on hydrogen, there are clearly two ways in which it can be utilized. One is the fuel cell route, and the other one is using hydrogen purely as a fuel that can go. In the first route, obviously, that's the long way. After the EV success, fuel cell route is the natural route. With ARI, we are now setting up capability for evaluation of fuel cell based vehicles. That will come in our Chakan facility in near future. On the second route, that is using hydrogen directly as a fuel, one experiment has been tried out in blending again hydrogen in CNG.
Okay.
Up to 18% blending has been tried out, and the report is also available with us. That basically enables us to continue using the CNG converted vehicles by putting additional hydrogen in it, which is much cleaner than the pure CNG.
Right.
And which also increases utilization of hydrogen in a stepped manner. So these are the two projects which currently we have.
And so, without any modification to the powertrain, right, or
Yes.
engine.
Obviously, some fine tuning is required,
Right.
because you're changing
But
the
at the
characteristics.
component level, you don't
No.
need.
Up to 18%, you don't need change in the cylinder. You don't need any major modifications in the fuel handling systems. So
Right.
that's the advantage. So it can be tried out in cities where CNG network is available.
Right. Another aspect where Indian automotive industry is going to take a big leap is the safety. Come October, and all vehicles will have to adhere to the new regulations. And in such a scenario, we just had the motor vehicle amendment bill passed. Do you think it will be a big boon towards reducing our India's dubious position status of the road fatalities in the global index?
Yes, the intention is why we are bringing in safety regulations is we are concerned about occupant safety, about road safety. To a large extent, it will bring a lot of occupant safety with the crash regulations. At ARI, we have done more than 300 crash already. More than several models have been already tested and approved. With that, we would have crossed one step. In my view, that's not going to be sufficient. So many other aspects before one can talk about further improving the vehicular controls. Enforcement is something which we should look
Absolutely,
at.
yeah.
And we have an advantage here of the IoT, Internet or connected vehicles or connectivity, will enable the user to be much more intelligent, much more informed, take appropriate decisions while driving. That is something which will enable more road safety.
Okay.
That's my view.
All right. And also, in terms of overall evolution, with such developments happening on from the policy maker side, from regulations and overall market transition, where do you see how do you see the Indian automotive industry evolving from here on? Because we are in a way kind of a in a crossroad of sorts, if one may call it that. Which way do you see the Indian automotive industry heading?
Difficult question. um, my view is we have already hit a bottom, and the industry is struggling on multiple fronts. Um, the focus is very clearly shifting towards developing much more ecosystem for public transportation. There is an integrated transportation which is also being talked about. So I think our focus is not to have more vehicles on the road. Our focus should be on giving efficient transportation to the user. And if we all work together, including obviously OEMs, including city planners, including us at ARA, that is the transportation goal I think we should aim at. Obviously, important is to bring in more efficient vehicles then, more connected vehicles, more safe vehicles, and that's where I think we all are going. Electrification is just one of them, or crash compatibility is just another requirement, or BS6 is just another regulation. But ultimately, we are moving towards safe, sustainable, and cleaner environment and a transportation sector.
Towards that objective, do you think that urban planners should make mobility an integral part of their overall planning process, especially when we are talking about X number of smart cities and increasing, reducing pollution, enhancing people's mobility?
Yes, most certainly. In fact, one of the study outcomes of our ambient air quality measurement studies talked about, rather than increasing the number of vehicles, if we can attempt in decongestionize traffic, that will result into better air quality, or that will result into better and more efficient transportation. Obviously, these are part of the city planning, and adequate attention, if it is given, I think it will be much more beneficial.
Lastly, Mrs. Urdhwarashe, what are the new projects or new facilities that ARAI is going to is investing or is going to invest? And secondly, where would you rate India's automotive testing and validation capability at in terms of the domestic, I mean, industry? Where would you rate the capability at the level of the testing network, testing infrastructure?
We have announced our fourth center coming up. This announcement was done in January during CIAT. This fourth center will be at Talegaon near Pune, and its focus is to work on mobility research areas, including the fire safety, including efficient energy conversions. So there will be an energy lab there. There will be fire safety requirement. Another focus for us is also to address the requirements related to off-highway vehicles. Currently, these vehicles are to a certain extent covered under Motor Vehicle Act, but there are safety and emission related roadmaps which are drawn for that sector. So we are setting up a center of excellence under the support from Department of Heavy Industries. So that will happen very soon at our fourth center. And to address your question, how do we stand in terms of rating on testing and homologation? Uh, I'll talk about ARA. I'm not authorized or competent enough to talk about other centers. Um, we always strive to be doing something which is at the top of our skill requirements. So our teams are trained not to do the testing and homologation for Indian requirements, but all our facilities and teams are accredited for export homologation as well. Um, we normally track the gaps that exist between the global regulations and Indian regulations, help the government in bridging those gaps, in setting up the standards. On the other side, we also invest from our side heavily on new facilities that are required. Currently, after NATRIP, there is nothing coming up our way. There's hardly any plan announced by government. It's not appearing anywhere. So there I see a lot of gap, and we need to create fund to support these activities. ARI on our own we can't do it.
Yes.
So that's where I am a little bit concerned. Other than that, on capacity wise and facility wise, we are ready and we are at par.
So today, let's say, can a vehicle right from ground up till its commercial launch be all the necessary testing and validation be done, say, at ARA in any of its facilities, or is there some gap there?
Yeah, we have been doing it. It's just that people don't know that this vehicle is developed at the component level or at the systems level at ARA. But we do it. In fact, many of the MNCs use our facilities in such a way that before the products are introduced in Indian markets, a lot of validation is done at ARA. And vice versa. We also do it for global customers for their introduction of new products elsewhere in the world.
Well, those who didn't know about these capabilities being there at ARA would know now after watching this interview. Always a pleasure talking to you, Mrs. Urdhwarashe.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
And thank you for watching this interview with Mrs. Rashmi Urdhwarashe, Director, Automotive Research Association of India. Do log in to our YouTube channel to watch many more such interviews from professionals of the automotive industry. And always do log in to our website, www.autocarpro.in. And also, you have, if you want it on print, we have the Fortnight magazine to keep you abreast of all the developments in the Indian and global automotive industry. Thank you very much for watching this interview. Goodbye.